Welcome, welcome, welcome to this. Oh my gosh, such going to be such a great interview with Harmony, Divine Harmony, and she is going to share with us about the March Equinox portal, which is what inspired this whole summit in the first place. Is we were starting to look at what was going on around the March Equinox, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's so much that's happening. This is such a rare event, and in fact, it may have been thousands of years since we've had this kind of alignment. I don't know exactly how long it's been, but it not in our lifetime, and probably not in many more lifetimes to come. So, very excited about that. Anything you want to add to that, Martha, before we have Harmony jump in?
Just yeah, two quick things. Number one, I'm just so happy to be here with Harmony and with Kaylin and Harmony, and this is like the perfect little like a happy meeting of hearts or something. I'm super excited to be able to have this conversation. And I want to point out that on on the 19th, which is probably you're probably seeing this the day before the 19th, we're going to be having a live and recorded equinox ceremony. So I think everything we're going to be talking about today is the perfect divine choreographed conversation to lead up to the energy and the portal moment, right? That I think will be particularly alive when we're in that ceremony on the 19th. So just want to give that context too for what's probably going on in this conversation before we even have the conversation. But I
I'm
have a
so
feeling.
excited that Harmony is going to be talking about the living sky, and she's going to show us some amazing, incredible images of what's going on. So, thank you, Harmony. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me get my PowerPoint up. And then I just have to move our videos. There we go. Get them out of the way. So I'm going to talk about the March Equinox portal of this year, 2025. That's a picture of the pyramid, well, one of the middle pyramid of Giza with the Sphinx in front and the equinox sunset that happens each year. The pyramids actually have a solstice equinox sunset alignment, and it's incredibly potent, and I'll be sharing some Egyptian imagery throughout this talk. This is not, there we go. So what I want to, and that's the same middle pyramid. It's actually my favorite. Of the three, the middle pyramid is my favorite pyramid. And somebody captured this with the amazing light. So I want to talk about the 4-day portal that is spanning the equinox, the March equinox, which will be spring in the northern hemisphere, fall or autumn in the southern hemisphere, but one of two equal day, equal night portals on the planet. On the 19th, we have the Sun conjunct Neptune at the omega point, the last degree of not just Pisces, but of the entire tropical zodiac. The next day, we have the equinox when the Sun moves into zero Aries, which is called the alpha point and also called the Aries point. And then 2 days later, we have the major lunar standstill, max moon out of bounds. So the most out of bounds the moon will go in the major lunar standstill, 19-year cycle, happens 2 days later. And then that night, we actually have the Sun-Venus conjunction. And so it's just like, pew, 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 like one thing after another activating portal. And we'll be exploring these through this talk. So the portal involves the solar gate of what I call the solar gate of resurrection. So in the solar mysteries, there's the 8 gates of the sun, solstices, equinoxes, cross-quarter days. And the next slide just shares a little more on that. But specifically from the northern hemisphere perspective, it's the gate of resurrection of the sun. The sun tips into the light half of the year. For those of you down in the south, it's actually the gate of truth and balance, where you tip into the dark half of the year. But they're the two tipping points. Right before tipping, they come to these equalizing points. The max moon out of bounds is going to trigger the vessel of love in human design. And actually, so are some of these other things. And I'll be talking about that. And then in the midst of that, the Sun-Venus conjunction is also at the Aries point It's round up to 3, so it's still there. And then, of course, the Sun Neptune conjunction is at the Omega point. And the transition from Omega to Alpha from 29-30 Pisces to 0 Aries in tropical really represents that, death and rebirth out of the cosmic womb of creation and coming back out into the light. And so we, of course, have this once a year, but there are some very rare things happening simultaneously in this little tight portal of time that really kind of make this particular equinox on a whole other level. And it's part of why you guys are having this event at this time. So this is just so you can see the solar gates, and it looks like the cross quarter days resized itself, but at spring, wherever you are, spring is the tipping point into the light half of the year, and it's called the gate of resurrection because it's the resurrection of the light of the sun out of the dark of winter. So we get more light, longer days. We're slowly moving towards more longer days, shorter nights. Summer is the highest point of the sun, and I call it the gate of enlightenment, where we're reaching for the highest light, and it's maximum light. Longer days, shorter nights, depends on where you live, obviously. If you're closer to the North Pole, you're going to have very few hours of night. And if you're at the equator, it's more equalized. I grew up in Hawaii, so I didn't actually really experience the seasons in the way you do in the mainland until I moved to the mainland and came above the equator. Fall is when we tip into the dark half of the year, and I call it the gate of truth and balance. And it's where we start to head into less light. And then finally, winter is, of course, the lowest point of the sun. And it's the gate of birth or rebirth, both of them. It's the rebirth of the sun. And it's the time of the least amount of light. The cross quarter days are those midpoints between them. And there's the calendar version that's celebrated on the dates you hear, like Bealtaina is May 1st. But actually, solar Bealtaina is like May 4th through 5th. The precise mid-fixed degree is 15 degrees of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and none of those are the calendar versions of the dates. So the solar gateways are all 0 degrees cardinal, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and then the cross quarter are 15 degrees fixed. And they're part of the like the solar mystery magic is what I call it. So the equinox is this equal day, equal night. And this image I found online is just, I like it. So we've got the December solstice and the June solstice, and depending on what side of the hemisphere you live in will determine how you're experiencing it. So for those of us in the northern hemisphere, December will be, the sun will be lower. And then we get to the equinox equalizing points. They're both at equal points where they cross. And then the sun is higher at the June solstice. For those of you in the southern hemisphere, it's obviously reversed. And we are essentially springing into the light half or the dark half of the year, but it's a time to pause. The equinoxes actually have more solar activity. It's like been kind of documented in research. And it's a time that's very activated, in the world, in the natural world, but also like spiritually. And for those of us in the northern hemisphere, it is spring. And this is that time that correlates with Jesus, the Son of God, resurrecting. And that's why this is called at the spring equinox the gate of resurrection, because the sun is being resurrected. And Jesus was born at the other solar gateway, they say, winter solstice, when we have the birth or rebirth of the sun. So we have the birth or rebirth of the sun at winter solstice. Then it moves to the very end of Pisces, which is the dissolution, the death, if you will, and that would be Jesus on the cross. And then the resurrection happens. And this is why Easter is actually around this time. But Easter is more correlated to the lunar calendar because it changes,
Can I
right?
tag on to what you said
Yeah.
about the equinox? What they have found is that the magnetic field of the Earth is lowered at the time of the equinox, and so this solar energy gets through. They call it equinox cracks, or they're magnetic cracks in the magnetic field of the earth, are these cracks. So there's more light coming in as a result. And there were many ancient cultures that were aware of this, that there's this shift in how the magnetic field of the earth. And so it gives us greater connection to other realms and dimensions. And it also is the times where they would do these big ceremonies. The Sacred Order of the Golden Dawn was really big, especially on the March equinox, but the equinoxes in general. So that's just something to know, that this is a powerful, powerful time for us to be energizing our intentions through sacred ceremony, by putting our attention on them through sacred ceremony. And yeah, so I love that you mentioned that, and that that is another, that's like happens with every equinox, but this equinox has its own
It's
unique,
like
off,
it's a
amazing.
whole other level.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Um, so the solar gates and the vessel of love is really interesting teaching. It's a human design teaching. So I will say, I study human design for myself. I don't teach it or even do human design readings, but I've studied it quite deeply for a while now. And this center here is called the G center. It's a place of identity, and it's made up of all the 8 gates of the sun. All the 8 gates that are in this G center are the solstices, the equinoxes, and the cross-quarter days. So the 4 gates of the solstices, equinoxes are called the cross of the vessel of love. And then the 4 cross-quarter days are called the cross of the Sphinx. And this part of the design chart is completely tied into the mutation that's coming in 2027. If you guys have heard, there's like this big human design shift that's happening in 2027. Well, it's essentially about these gates and how the sun at the equinox is shifting from one gate to another, but also all of them. All the gateways are shifting. So the winter solstice gate is going into a new, human design gate. All of them are just starting to shift. And it's tied into the turning of the ages. So the vessel of love specifically, though, is what I want to focus on. So here's a closer up picture of it here. And so the 4 gates of the vessel of love are 10, 15, 46, 25. This is winter solstice, summer solstice, from the Northern Hemisphere perspective, fall equinox, and spring equinox. And each of them represent some aspect of love. So the spring equinox gate from the Northern Hemisphere, so it's going to be reversed if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. It's your fall equinox gate for 25, and your winter for 15, your spring for 46, and your summer for 10. So the spring equinox 25 gate is the love of spirit. It's essentially the gate of universal love. And these gates all span from 2815 of the mutable sign before the crossing into the season, and then till 3 degrees 52 of the next sign. So for spring, it literally is 2815 Pisces until 352 Aries. And this is a gate that's all about love of spirit, and it is Aries, which is about individuality and initiation and activation, and it's the resurrection degree and tipping into the light half or the dark half, depending where you are. And it would be like the position of dawn or sunrise, in the 24-hour cycle. And we have so many things activating this gate of the love of spirit this year. Neptune's there and actually began going into, because I said it starts at 2815 Pisces, began last year. I forgot to write it down, but I think it began last year. It might have been at the very end of 2023, but I think it was just last year. The North Node has been there transiting, right, from Aries to Pisces. And the Sun-Venus conjunction coming will be here. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction will be here. That's for next year. Both Saturn and Neptune are moving through this gateway as they leave 29 Pisces, go to 0 Aries, and go back and forth. And it's the reset point of tropical astrology. It's the beginning of the tropical astrology year. So the 15th gate is the solstice gate, summer in the north, winter in the south, and it's the love of humanity gate. And it also runs 2815 Gemini to 352 Cancer. And it's the highest point of light of the sun, the enlightenment point, the gate of enlightenment. I call it the gate of union with the mother because you're returning to the celestial mother. Cancer is the sign of the mother. And it would correlate with high noon, in a 24-hour cycle. Jupiter is coming there in end of May into June. So then we have the winter solstice. Well, actually, I put these in backwards, but it doesn't matter. The winter solstice gate is the love of living and the love of the self. And it's 2815 Sag to the 352 Cap. And it's the lowest point of the sun. So it would be like the midnight sun, if you will. And it's the gate of birth or rebirth. And the out of bounds moon is going to be in this gate. And then the fall equinox one, I don't know why I had these written backwards, but it runs 2815 Virgo to 352 Libra, and it's the love of the body and being human, And it's the gate of truth and balance from the northern hemisphere. It's one of the two tipping points that would correspond to dusk or sunset from the northern hemisphere perspective, and the south node is there now. So all of them are getting really activated, but particularly pay attention to 25 and 15, which are the love of spirit and the love of humanity. There's so much going on with these two gateways, activating this vessel of love. And it really ties in with the epicness of what we're heading into. So we're talking about the equinox and how important it is. It starts the tropical year and, the magnetic fields and the gates of love. Well, the equinox is tied into the turning of the ages. And so there's different ways of calculating ages. So I just want to state up front, like the ancient way of calculating ages, like from the Egyptian perspective, is to go out on spring equinox from the northern hemisphere perspective, look due east before the sun rises, see what constellation is rising before the sun. That's the age we're in. And the way people are calculating ages today is they're looking to see where is the sun at the moment of the spring equinox. But when at the moment of the spring equinox sunrise, you're not seeing anything. The sun is rising. Like you can't see the constellations. And even, a little bit before the sun fully rises, the stars seem to be dissolving. You can't see things. So the ancients paid attention to what they could see visually, not what they would calculate in software and look at. And so there's like different ideas about ages in part because of that. Also, I actually learned from Walter Crudenton, who's written a really great book on binary, oh God, what is the name of the book? Binary stars, and I think it's over there somewhere. But anyhow, he told me that there is thoughts that actually the ancient, even more ancient way of calculating ages was seeing what was rising before the fall equinox sun and seeing that as the sign that's going out. But that there was like a thought that it was fall equinox that you calculated from, not spring, and you saw what's like leaving. Anyhow, so there's a lot of conversations around ages, and the turning of the ages is about whatever's happening at the equinox. If you're seeing the living sky, or if you're looking at where the sun is, that is how we're calculating ages. And so I'm going to show you some living sky pictures so we can sort of
I have a
see.
question.
Yeah.
Because it occurs to me that if you, because you can't really see the stars that are behind the sun at the equinoxes or any point, anytime. I mean,
Yes.
if a planet's conjunct the sun, you cannot see that planet,
Yes.
or you can't see the stars behind it. So, do you think that maybe they were paying attention to the stars that were opposite, like what was in the evening sky, or what would be setting to get a sense of the opposite season? Do you see what I'm saying? Um, so that they could that could be a confirmation, like they see this is what's rising before the sun, and then they can see what's setting in the
Yeah.
opposite season and know that, oh, in the opposite season that's where the sun is or going to be near in the constellation. So just a question that occurred to me.
Yeah, I'm sure that the astrologers, astronomers tracked everything. And I also know intuitively you can journey into the stars and see what's there even when the light is out. But I also know that, from Bernadette Brady actually has a really great article on this. It's called, you can Google, she's a amazing astrologer, has done a lot of work with the fixed stars and has software and books, lots of books. And her article is called Who's Riding in the Fiery Boat of the Sun? And then she talks about how in ancient Egypt, the way that they calculated the ages was to see what was leading the sun. It was seen as that constellation was guiding the sun, and the sun rose after it. And so, anyhow, this is the picture of the sun at the equinox this coming March 20th, 2025. I have it coded for my time where I am, and actually it should be 5:01. It says 5:03, but whatever. I think it moved a little before I took the picture. But, what do you notice here? This is Venus, and the sun and Venus are going to catch up with each other in 2 days. But at the equinox, here's Aries in the living sky. And we're supposed to be having the sun move into zero Aries. Well, what this is showing you is the difference between tropical and living sky astrology. And I specify living sky. I'm not saying sidereal, because sidereal and tropical are both systems that have divided the sky into equal 12 pie slices. None of the constellations are equally 30 degrees. And also, they have like these boundaries, like from running from the furthest left star of Pisces to the furthest right star is like, I think, 38 degrees. So the sun moves through Pisces for 38 degrees, and arguably, the equinox point, as we're moving through ages, would be moving through at 38 degrees. So multiply that by 72 years per degree, and we've got a 27,000 or 2,700 or so year age, not the 2160 we're told, where you take, everything and divide it by 12. And there's also these boundaries. There's like this space between the tip of the Pisces fish and the knee of the Aquarius dude. Actually used to be a woman. And so, like, where are we going to say the boundary lies? And then some of them also like overlap each other. So it gets, the living sky is wild and chaotic. And what tropical did is it tied everything to the seasons, the sun-earth relationship. So zero Aries got fixed at the equinox point to represent the seasonal experience we're having here on Earth. And at the time it got fixed, it was loosely aligned. I think the time that I have it written down somewhere, I always forget dates, but at some point, I think it was 275 or 280 AD is when there was a perfect alignment. But they're not aligned anymore. And so actually, me and Kaylin were talking the other day, and she told me that Rudolf Steiner suggests, and I really like this, I'm trying to make myself remember to do it, that when you're talking about the signs, you say the sign name, but when you're talking about the constellation, you say the animal it is. So it's like the sign of Pisces in the fishes, the constellation of the fishes. So the living sky, though, is really important. Both of them are important. Our experience here on Earth and our seasons are important, but having removed ourselves from an organic living sky that is constantly moving and fixing something has kind of like, disconnected us from our star connections, our star awareness. And I think it's important to reclaim it, and they can work together. They really actually can. Um,
Can I
so
say something really quick?
yeah, yeah,
This is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I feel like what happened was there was a splitting in our consciousness when these things got when they didn't recognize that there were two different systems that actually the seasons move through the constellations 1 degree every 72 years, every 25,920 years. They comes back to any starting point that you would pick in the sky, and that the seasons have their own essence and the constellations have their own essence, and that they are what create the evolution over time as these different seasonal points move into different constellations. Then that essence of the constellation is being infused into the sign. And so we don't have wholeness until we bring the two back together and we bring the understanding. So I love what you're sharing, because we need to have the understanding of what's the essence of the constellation, what's the essence of the fish and the spring equinox, or the zero Aries point rising there at the spring equinox, or March equinox for opposite season for those in the southern hemisphere. What's the essence? What does that bring? And I know that when it moved into the fish, the 0 point moved into the fish. I forget the exact date. I have it written down somewhere. But that was when the religious war started.
Mm.
And so it's like, oh, Aries being the warrior, especially in patriarchal culture, and the fish representing maybe the more spiritual nature of life and humans and so on. And so that would make sense that that happened then. Uh, so historically, we could look back and see what was going on when different seasonal points were moving into different constellations. And so yeah, and then here we are with the March equinox point right in the head of the fish, getting ready to go, but it's going to be a long time before it actually gets into the water bearer, also known as Aquarius. So anyway, I just want to say I love what you're talking about, because this is something that if we can really begin to understand the difference and start to bring it back together, we start to weave ourselves back into wholeness, which is part of what this whole summit's about. Anyway, it's like birthing ourselves into wholeness through the power of love. And I also just wanted to say that I loved what you brought in about the human design, and that because that was a piece I wasn't aware of, and that that gate covers the Pisces Aries piece, which is what this
Yeah.
is all about also. So I just wanted to say that too. So cool.
Yeah, no, I love human. I think it's so much fun to study human design. And the gene keys, I study them too. Um,
Can I,
so
can I
the
just
sun, oh, go ahead.
add,
Yeah, yeah,
throw,
yeah.
just throw in really, really quick? Yeah, I second everything Kaylin said, and I would also just add in for people's awareness that uh I think all three of us approach this combination in basically the same way. And I don't want to speak for Heather, but I would say from knowing her work, I would say she does as well. Like it feels like in the world of astrology, it's relatively not that common, but I think it is more and more and more and more common to both acknowledge tropical, but then also really be feeling and in relationship with living sky. And that's absolutely so important to me. And lots of people in this involved, lots of the speakers involved in the summit, not every single one, but I think, yeah, just
Yeah,
yeah.
the way I conceive of tropical is it feels like it's the astrology for our human self, but the living sky is astrology for our spirit. And
Oh,
we are human and we are divine, and the whole point of being here is to anchor the divine in our human self. So, like, there's validity in both, and it's not like just because it's the human self that's here on the earth experiencing the seasons in the sun-earth relationship, which is tropical, was based on, doesn't mean like that's less important than shooting ourselves into the stars. Like, they're both important, you
But
know?
how
And
are we interweaving our human self with our divine self? Uh,
yes,
because again, that's something we got separated from, and we could maybe even look to when they started separating these into different ways of looking at it. And I love that you mentioned the Rudolf Steiner piece, because one of the things I find so confusing is if somebody's talking about the constellation of Pisces and calling it Pisces, my mind is like Pisces. Oh, and then I think this happens for a
yeah,
lot of people. That's the seasonal sign. But if you call it fish, then it's like, oh, it's different. And the seasonal sign that overlays that constellation is Aries. And so here we have the Pisces, Aries, or the fish, Aries, like the fit. Aries has been in the fish for such a long time, and it's been
I
seen as
know.
too. So there's another one of those integrations of how are we doing that? And I think yeah, it just really helps to call it by its alternate name, so that
It
people
does.
get
It's
bigger.
taking me like reprogramming my
Right.
brain to
I know
remember
it
this.
takes a
I'm
while.
like, and
Yeah.
I like I said to you guys before we were recording, like so in my studies, like I have a class that I taught called Stargate Mystery School, which was all about moving through the stargates through the year. And in that class, I taught about how at the end of the age of Aries is when we fixed Aries as the first sign. And that Aries is actually not really the first sign. Nothing's the first sign. Whatever the age we're in is the first sign, and it is leading. And so we now have this kind of stasis that we've created by fixing Aries as the first sign, Aries as, the first degree at the equinox, when actually the whole thing about the ages is about how does the equinox move through the constellations? And, so we've taken something and systematized it because it definitely makes it easier to cast the chart, right? Just plug it in, the software evenly divided, whatever. But it's like it's missing some of its like life force because it got put into a system. And I think that's a big part of what we're doing right now on Earth is just like really needing to start questioning systems, education, medical systems, like, everything, government systems, things that we've been told this is how it is, this is how we always do it. In science, anything that's at a point of stasis for too long, that's a precursor to death. Like all things are constantly evolving and changing, and if they're not, they're moving towards death. That's like a scientific thing. And so astrology, it's really funny. I was studying astrology for like 12 years before I ever did anything with it. I just did it because I loved it. And it was like, I was so excited about it. And then I went to grad school, Pacifica Graduate Institute, and I needed to do this field work, and they're very open-minded spiritual school. So I did field work on astrology, and I actually studied with Eric Francis for the summer, and he taught me how to write a horoscope. And then I did this series of interviews of about 15 astrologers. This was back in 2008. And the premise of my interview series was the evolution of astrology. And what did these people think astrology needed to evolve? And it was really interesting, the different answers I got. I remember a couple people, and I'm not saying anybody's name, but told me that astrology didn't need to evolve. It was already a perfect system. And I was like, wrong answer. And then I got some really inspired answers like Michael Luton, the late Michael Luton, who's recently passed. Um, he's an amazing astrologer, and he gave some of the most inspired responses. And anyhow, so I think that this is also a really important part of reclaiming the living sky is kind of getting into why did we make Aries be the first? And why did we systematize and put something in a system? And what did it do that was helpful, but what did it do that wasn't, you know? And the reconnecting of the living sky is almost like breathing life back in to the tropical system, I think, personally. And even sidereal, because I know sidereal says, oh, we are the living sky, but no, Virgo is like 45, 46 degrees, the sun to move through. Scorpio is really small. Like sidereal is also evenly divided in 30-degree pie slices. And none of the living sky fits into a box like that. It's wild and chaotic, like the cosmic feminine herself. So
Yay.
So this is a picture from the ceiling of Dendera in Egypt, and I'm really into Egypt, so we'll be bringing some Egypt things in. And it's in the hypostyle hall. There's actually another slide that's going to show you like the ceiling of Dendera, the zodiac ceiling. But you probably can tell that these are the Pisces fishes. They look like two fishes. They're swimming the same direction though. And it's very curious. What is this little rectangular thing with these wavy lines in between? Well, actually, that is Pegasus. And they didn't see Pegasus as a horse. They had a different teaching on it. And so did some of the ancient cultures like Babylonian and Sumerian. So Here is the image of this zodiac ceiling, and you can see again, here's the Pisces fish. And then they make it look more like a square here. Over there, it's more like a very long rectangle. And you can see Pisces here, and again, no winged horse. So what's going on? So let's look at the living sky again. Here's the Pisces fishes as we know them today. And here's the great square of Pegasus. So that's literally what we just saw on the ceiling of Dendera. We see the square or rectangle between two fishes. And these whole area of the sky is essentially the primordial waters of creation. From Cetus the whale and Eridanus, even the river below it, up to Pisces who swim in the water, over to Aquarius, the water bearer who has the southern fish down by his feet where Fomalhaut is, and even Capricorn, he's a sea goat, so his tail is right here pointing in the direction of Aquarius. His head goes the other way. Oops.
And
This is
the dolphins way above too.
Oh
Delphin.
yes, Delphinus is up there. And so we're in this like primordial waters of creation part of the sky right now. I call them the Grail waters, like the numinous waters of the Grail. It's not actually the Grail and the Grail mysteries that's special. It's what the Grail is holding. Although everybody's fixated on the actual Grail itself. And so the primordial waters of creation, they're the ethereal waters. And so it's ether and water combined. So when we have the four elements, fire, earth, air, water, there's a fifth element, ether. We've also forgotten that a lot, actually, and it's the element of spirit. And that's like honestly key for humanity to evolve and come back into balance and not extinct itself. And we've got the holy waters, or the holy wine that's in the chalice. And when we drink it, we're infused with spirit. So in different primordial cultures, they would have names for these creation waters. So like Egyptian Nun, in Hawaiian, it's the Po, and I'm part Hawaiian. It's the abyss, it's the void, it's the cosmic womb. These waters of primordial creation are always seen as dark, black, chaotic. Like it's not like, a light blue color of Caribbean water. It's like the waters of the primordial, oceanic part of the sky. And ether and water are actually the above and below aspects of the feminine principle, with the earth being the mediating force that brings things into manifestation. And so the celestial feminine, she has her etheric ether aspect, and then she has her watery aspect, and then her form is in the earth. And then the air and the fire are the yang elements. And of course, ether came first and birthed everything, but that's the one we've lost touch with, which is kind of ironic. We've lost touch with what birth does. So here I'm closing up in so you can see better. This is the zero thing here is literally the zero Aries point for, the equinox. And then you can see how we've got this fish here. We can see Pegasus square. And then even the tail of Cetus is down there. And so here's the date. I wrote it in here. The precession of zero Aries hasn't correlated with the start of the ram in about 1700 years. It's like different ideas because again, it's like, what do you consider to be the boundary? And everybody has their own interpretation. But the Pisces fish, this star here is 2148 Pisces. So this star, the furthest right star here on the fishes, and then the furthest left is 2908 Aries. So the Pisces fishes span from like 21 and change Pisces to 29 and change Aries. And again, that's, 38 degrees. And if the sun in precession, the ages, things move 1 degree every 72 years. When you do the math, the age of Pisces technically should last like 2,736 years. And that's not counting, the equinox moving through the boundary and where you consider that to be. So the ancient way of the ages was to, again, look at what was rising before the sun. It wasn't about where is the sun. But so that's why part of the argument of some people say we haven't gotten the age of Aquarius. And then some people go, well, take a look around at all the technology and all the things that are happening and the Industrial Revolution. And yeah, I think we're in the age of Aquarius. And you can argue till the cows come home. That's like something I think astrologers love to do, or debate, let's say debate. But if you want to look at things from the perspective of where the sun is at the moment of the equinox, this is where it is. It's still in the fishes, and it's also connected to the Pegasus square or the primordial field. And it's also connected to the tail of Cetus, who is called a monster, but anciently it was just a mother whale. She got turned into something evil when her story was rewritten. So here's just like the basic fish. Pisces is Latin for fish. It's one of the largest constellations in the sky. The modern myth is that Aphrodite and her son Eros, or the Roman Venus and Cupid, they took the form of fish to hide from the monster, Typhon. And there was a cord that kept them together so that they wouldn't lose each other. And some say that they jumped into the river and two fish saved them. There's different variations. The Babylonian version of this myth is it's two fishes tied with a cord that's been overlaid on an older myth where actually there was only one fish, the one on the left, and the one on the right was a swallow bird. And and the thing to understand is myth is a product of the consciousness at the time, and it actually reflects the evolution of consciousness. And so it's actually important for myths to change because myths reflect human consciousness evolving and growing or changing. Sometimes it's a devolution. And so when you fix your myths and refuse to change them, refuse to evolve them, it's kind of similar to fixing Aries as the first sign. We actually want our myths to evolve to keep up with where we're at. And Joseph Campbell says myths are meant to inspire human consciousness, and if we have the same myths that are never changing and they're talking about old stories that don't really apply to how we're trying to grow and evolve, then maybe we need to shift things. And so it's completely normal to have changing myths, but it also helps to understand what was there before to see how it evolved or why it got changed. A lot of times they get changed, especially the Greek and Roman myths. There was a lot of like political posturing around things like, for example, Cassiopeia, the vain queen. Well, there's stars in that constellation that talk about her being a dark-skinned queen. She was an Ethiopian queen. And they had to make her out to be bad because they were, the culture that was saying they were best. And so they had to malign the Ethiopian culture. And, they wrote the myth to be like a story that was kind of like, shaming them or putting them in their place or whatever. And so you have to understand like what's behind things. And studies of myths is amazing. So I like to look at the etymology of the star names, and I specifically look at the most ancient star names that we can find, which are typically Arabic, but there's also Latin that are written down. I mean, there's older ones, but I couldn't find them. And so some of the stars in Pisces talk about the spout, the outpouring of water, the cord that marks, the cord that ties them together, the mouth of the fish, but there's also Revati, which means wealth or prosperity. It's a Hindu goddess who has the power to transcend. And if you see over here, here's the swallow bird, and here is the southern fish, which has to do with Fomalhaut. And then this is the other fish, and it has to do with a goddess, actually, Anuntum. So there's actually a lot of goddess energy over in this side of the sky. We're told the great one is Ea or Enki, but previous to Ea, it was actually Gula, the great one. It was a great female deity who is the irrigator and poured water onto the earth. And these are, the area of the sky where there'd be a lot of rain back then that would saturate the earth. And so understanding, well, also, I just want to say there's a connection with this part of the sky with a Targetus, who's an ancient goddess. She's the lady of the sea. She's seen often as like a mermaid and has like a mermaid tail. She's a Syrian goddess, so from Syria. And she has a story that essentially sounds like the Aphrodite Eros story a little bit, is essentially there were two fish. They found an enormous egg floating in the river. The fish guided the egg out of the watery depths, onto the river, rolled it on land. A dove appears, broods on the egg, and then out is born this goddess. So it sort of sounds like Venus being born out of the sea, right? And then you see the whole how, Aphrodite and Eros were the fish, or maybe were saved by fish. So you kind of see that they recycle common elements of myth. So back to here, Pegasus, we're told, is a horse, but I did this with Stellarium so you can see the constellation images. It's a horse with no back end. So it's like a half a horse, And I remember when I saw that, that was actually one of my first thoughts of what was there before, because it's not even a full horse. Like it's got like, they show just usually the front of it. Sometimes they'll say like some other things here are its legs, but we're told it's the winged horse that sprang from the neck of Medusa when she was beheaded. And Chrysaor, or the warrior, sprang with the golden sword, and then also her. And in ancient Egypt, they call it the Great Square. And those 4 stars there, Alpheratz of Andromeda, Sheet, Algenib, and Markab, are all the 4 stars of the square. And essentially, it is likely the location of the waters of Nun, or also called the mythical Sea of Knives in the Egyptian tradition. It's the Sea of Knives connects to the creation myth, where a lotus flower emerges from the waters, of Nu or Nun, of a lake, and then the lotus opens up, and then the divine child Re, or the sun, is born. The Sumerians called it the primordial field, and the Arabs called it the well bucket. And here's the Arabic well bucket. So this is actually from Danielle Adams. She's an astronomer who has done all this amazing work on Arabic mythology and astronomy. And she's like one of my favorite people to read the astronomy stuff. And she's done a lot of research. I think she even did like a dissertation on this. So the celestial well bucket, or the ancient Egyptian primordial field, it was also called in Babylonian myth, the paradise. So this square has got like some magic to it, right? And these were the waters of creation being poured out onto the earth from the well bucket. And having water was important, to grow things, and, but it's also water as the essence of the divine feminine. I mean, there's many ways you can kind of play with it. Here, back to the original image, here's that primordial field, and it even has like wavy lines, which implies water. And then this is the Babylonian version of it, and you can see the swallow. That was the other fish. It's a bird there. So back to the stars in Pegasus, some of them mean the side, the bucket robe, the nose or muzzle. There's a couple in here that are called lucky stars. Matar, the lucky star of rain. Sadal Bari, the lucky star of the splendid one. Sheet means the one who goes and returns. And it is also said maybe it means the upper arm, but Sheet is at 29 Pisces in tropical. It's the one who goes and returns. And actually, this area of the sky is full of all the lucky stars. They're called the auspicious asterisms, and they're not just in Pegasus. You can see the last 3 letters show you what constellation it's from. So these are Pegasus stars, but these are Aquarius stars. And then we even have a couple Capricorn stars. These are called the lucky stars, the subtle stars, and they're all in this part of the sky. And it's lucky and blessed because they're pouring water onto the earth, the fertile waters of creation, the primordial waters, the baptismal waters. It's not just the birth, it's also the baptism, which is, takes you to the rebirth. And so this whole area of the sky is seen as like auspicious. And we've been having our age as it's shifting, starting to move through these things, with Pegasus stars now, but we'll get to Aquarius stars and we'll get to Capricorn stars, but it'll take you a good, 7,000 years or something as the equinox to move through. All of that, maybe in your next lifetime, you'll experience some of the others. So I just want to point out two stars that the zero Aries point is the closest to right now. One is Sheet, which you can see here. It's got the little circle around it. And so Sheet aligns with the sun. Obviously, the sun is not conjunct the star because it doesn't go off the ecliptic, but the aspect can be made. And Sheet is currently at 2943 Pisces. So it's literally 17 minutes from zero Aries. This is actually the tightest star alignment to the equinox. And Solar Fire says this star has to be is about being a thinker or intellect, and I think it's because of springing out of the head of Medusa. But it's the one who goes and returns. And it's processing, whatever, and it's going to eventually move to exactly 000 Aries. That'll be in like 17 minutes. So I should have done the math, but I don't know, 20 years, 25 years. Sorry, I'm trying to do the math in my head. And it's a star that's connected to the primordial, square, the well bucket, the paradise. And then the other star that it's closest to is actually the tail star of Cetus. And it's called Deneb Kaitos or Deneb Kaitos Shamali. And it's currently at 115 Aries. So it's further from, but it's still there. And Deneb means tail. Kaitos is supposedly an Arabic version of Cetus, which is the Greek word meaning whale or cetacean, but later got called sea monster. And it's actually, there's thoughts that this constellation anciently is connected to the Mesopotamian goddess Tiamat, Namu, who was a primordial water dragon serpent being. She was the original female creatrix. And she's down there right below this equinox turning point. So we have the one who goes and returns, the well bucket star, and then we have the tail of the primordial mother, getting aligned within this portal, this equinox portal. And, Neptune is about to transit this, and Saturn is about to transit this, going over the zero Aries point as well. So Neptune, I noticed this, it must have been early last year, maybe it was the end of the year before, but I just was like, all of a sudden I was like, wow, every time right before we have a solstice or an equinox, we're getting a Neptune activation. The sun is either conjunct Neptune, square Neptune, opposite Neptune, right before the equinox or the solstice. And that's because Neptune's been transiting in the last degrees of Pisces and is heading into the first of Aries. And so what's interesting, though, is we're now going to be shifting from Neptune activating just before the portal to Neptune activating during the portal, and then it'll slowly move to, Neptune activating after. And Neptune is the great dissolver. He dissolves ego so that we can realize spirit. He dissolves the boundaries of the ego. He doesn't get rid of the ego. I mean, that's actually a big shadow work teaching. You're not really trying to get rid of your ego. You're just trying to help your ego realize it's not everything. And it gets to be the servant, not the master. So you're not trying to kill your ego. But it does need to dissolve its rigid boundaries because it thinks it's everything and it's not, it's missing out. And when those boundaries dissolve, we can merge with all of primordial creation and realize oneness. Neptune's also the higher heart. So he's the planet of divine love, of agape, of compassion, of kindness, of empathy. Of course, he has a shadow side too, you know, illusion, delusion, deception, escapism, using addictions to numb out because we're just feeling too much and we don't know how to deal with all the feels. So we do something to check out. So Neptune's, I kind of visualize Neptune transits as like a giant sea wave coming and taking everything back out to sea. And what's left standing survived. You know, so like maybe you have a sand castle and the ocean comes and pulls it out, but maybe you put your castle up further and didn't build it with sand and used bricks and it will survive. I don't know. It's like a metaphor, but Neptune has that operating quality. Like he comes in and goes, what needs to go back to the ocean? What do you need to surrender? Or one of the things I will say in readings for people who are in a Neptune transit, I was just like, remember Alice in Wonderland when she falls down the rabbit hole? Like that's a Neptune transit. And she's the perfect person to model Neptune transit. Not once does she freak out when she's falling down the rabbit hole. Oh my God, I'm falling. Where am I going to land? She's just like looking at everything and floating and just, you know, being very Neptunian. And then she lands fine. That's like what you got to do during Neptune. You have to surrender, you know, and you have to trust and you have to have faith. But it's bringing in the sea change to the vessel of love, the gates of the vessel of love, the love of humanity, the love of spirit, the love of, you know, the self, the love of the body and being human. And then Saturn is going to join in too, because Saturn's moving in through the equinox point. So we're like in this massive sea change. I mean, that's the word that comes in. I guess it's Neptune, but and then of course it's carrying us to the Saturn Neptune conjunction next year at the Aries point. So the last thing I want to share is just the major lunar standstill max out of bounds. So we've been in the major lunar standstill cycle. Kaylin and I actually met this past summer, summer 2024, at the Kalender Standing Stones. Also, Nura was there, and we were there for the summer solstice full moon, which was the lowest declination solstice full moon in the cycle. It came the lowest to the Earth. I know a lot of people are saying it's this one this year, but it's not. I tracked the declinations, and the lower declination was the summer of 2024. This one will still have the visual. The visual will be amazing, so you can still go. But in terms of like the winter or whatever, the turning point of the cycle, that
Plus
was
it was
last.
a solstice.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, full moons are going to be in early June and July, so it won't be at the solstice.
I know,
That
I
was
know.
high magic that we were getting to experience. It was so cool.
Yes. So now the most out of bounds. So then the major lunar standstill cycle is a 19-year cycle. I actually have a whole interview about it on my YouTube channel, like 2 hours, I think, or something. I'm summing this up in like a short little period of time, but essentially the moon usually stays within the bounds of the sun, but it will go extremely out of bounds every 19 years. And we're in it. And it was last year, but it's also finishing up this year. And the max out of bounds that the moon goes, the most out of bounds it goes is actually March 22nd, 7:29 a.m. Eastern. So adjust for your time zone. 2 days after the equinox, same day as the Sun-Venus conjunction, later that evening at 9:07, the sun will be at 2:05 Aries, and the sun is always opposite the Earth. So the Earth will be at 2:05 Libra. You just don't ever really see the Earth in the astrology charts typically, but it's always opposite. And then they're both going to be squared by the out of bounds moon at 2:05 Capricorn, activating 3 of the 4 gates of the vessel of love. And then the moon aligns with the galactic center. And that's one of the standout things about the max or the out of bounds moon is it reaches to the galactic center by alignment. I mean, it doesn't, you know, go right in front of it. And I have a
It
picture.
actually does. It drops so low across
Yeah.
from the ecliptic that it literally passes over galactic center at its max point. when you
Well,
look
this
at
is
our map?
this is the max point exact of when it squares the sun, and it's just past it, but it's in alignment with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. And it's also interestingly, I was like, ooh, there's a line between Moon, Galactic Center, and Antares. They all kind of look like they're on the same plane there. So the alignment of the moon with the galactic center and the anti-galactic center is like a big part of the major lunar standstill cycle. And then there's also, this one's not going to come low to the ground because it's not a full moon that's at the solstice, you know? So at the winter solstice, the sun is low, so the full moon will be the highest full moon at the major lunar standstill. At the summer solstice, the sun is high, so the moon is low. And then specifically in Scotland, where we were and we got to finally meet, you can see the moon walk the land. Like it literally just pops up and barely goes up in the sky and appears to walk on the mountains. It's like the trippiest, you know. So we've got the moon, the principle of the feminine, the mother, emotion, intuition, the pacifying principle of the orb of receptivity and reflection, receiving messages from the galactic center to carry forward into the next 19-year cycle of the major lunar standstill. Now, this always happens around the equinox, the max out of bounds moon. But this 19-year cycle, it happens just before the Sun-Venus conjunction. And then this also only happens once every 19 years. So we've got the solar active principle in union with the divine feminine principle of love and partnership and collaboration. And then we've got the other major divine feminine principle aligning with the galactic center, all within a couple of days. So it's epically epic. So we've got the gates that are getting activated, just so you know, that sun earth opposition square the moon. The sun will be at the love of spirit gate 25. The earth will be at the love of the body or the flesh or being human, gate 46. And then the moon itself will be at gate 10, which is love of living, love of the self. The only one that's missing is the summer solstice gate, the love of humanity, and we get that in the summer
And
when
I just emphasize also that this is happening in the midpoint of the two eclipses that we're having.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so we'll see a quarter moon in the sky, right? Like, so to bring it really, really simple for people, like
Yeah.
we're having the lunar eclipse on, which by the time of you're seeing this video, probably that's already happened on March 13th, 14th. And then this timing is in the middle of the two eclipses, and then on March 29th is the solar eclipse. So at this timing that Harmony's talking about, you'd be seeing a quarter moon in the sky. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Which you can sort of, it's hard to see because that thing is so small, but it's half dark, half light.
Or half
Um,
full.
yeah, there you go. So, we've got the vessel of love being activated. And actually, it really got kicked off at the winter solstice at the end of 2024, because that winter solstice, we had the sun in Capricorn, Earth in Cancer, and the nodes were at the Aries Libra close to the 0 point. So all four gates of the vessel of love showed up in the winter solstice chart. And that's a chart for the year. If you're looking at the years starting at winter solstice. And then we're also having a massive activation at spring, and that's the other time that you would typically look at a chart for the year, but from the tropical perspective. So, I see all of this as preparing us for the Saturn-Neptune conjunction for next year. So I think this is the last slide, I believe. This is an image by Arthur, or art, I think it's a painting actually, by Arthur Rackham. It's called Sangreal, and she's obviously holding a flaming grail, and she has a flaming crown, and she's standing on flames, and she's surrounded in an aura. So for me, this portal and this period of time, but also just this year, because there's like epic other things happening. Like me and Kaylin had a talk about Jupiter moving into Cancer conjunct Sirius in August. And it's just like, whew. Anyhow, this is going to be interesting here. So this is a great time to really be activating the grail or the vessel of love in your being. to become the Grail, to embody the Grail, you know, as you named this summit, the superconductors of love, right? We're becoming the channels, the vessels to receive what's coming in from the heavens, from the cosmos, from the Great Mother, from the Great Father. And the love frequency is there, but you know, you have to have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, an open heart to receive, and also to give, and be grounded in your body so you can anchor it. And the Grail is thought to be the treasure of the world, and everybody's looking for it, you know, outside of themselves. And it's actually a journey within. And so I just want to close with a quote from Nicholas Roerich, who's like this amazing mystical artist. He has like so much amazing art. And he has one piece where there were Sanskrit words, and he said they meant, "Through the stars I come. I bring the chalice covered with the shield. Within it I bring a treasure, the gift of Orion." And the treasure is essentially the Chintamani stone, and it's supposed to come from Sirius. Like Orion gifts it, but it actually comes from Sirius. And we're having a Jupiter-Sirius conjunction this summer. So I was just like, wow, things are lining up. So happy blessed equinox portal. That's my logo. So
I love that logo. That's amazing. Thank you, Harmony. Okay, so here's a thought that comes to my mind because you were talking about the myths and the myths is how they've been in the past and really we're writing the new myths. We're the living, but also writing or creating or I don't know,
yeah,
telling the new myths, I guess, or maybe because I think everything that you've said here could be connected to a new myth. Just saying. And
yeah.
so we're the new myth writers. What are the new myths that we want to bring forward? And not myths as in something that's not true, but myths as in something that helps to instruct, inform, and can guide us forward into this, you know, from this portal forward. So I'm loving just everything that you shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just want to say one quick thing about that. To me, what we need for myths are ones that exalt the feminine principle back into her rightful place, like the original meaning of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And you can even see it in the tarot, like they have it like hidden in the tarot imagery. The feminine with her womb and her heart and being the receptive principle, she receives from the universe and she gestates and births, you know. And the masculine is meant to protect her, to be the sacred protector and defender of innocence and purity so she can walk the earth unharmed, which is how the Cherokee actually say it. So the Cherokee, I should have maybe put this as a slide. I'm not sure I'm going to say it exactly as it's supposed to be, but it's something like a woman's purpose is to guide a man back to his soul and spirit, and a man's purpose is to protect the woman so she can walk the earth unharmed. And right now, we're in a really messed up place where that's not what's happening. You know, we're in a place where the masculine energy in all of us, so this is not about men, it's about the essence, has gotten so extreme. And you can see it out in the world, like violence and bloodshed. And I was watching something. I'm trying to track where this even came from. I think it was on another summit I was a part of in December. But I was watching something on Twitter or X. It was this guy, I can't even remember who he is, so I can't say, but he was essentially saying that in order for us as a nation to be safe, we have to make the other nations be scared. And I was like, that is the wrong principle. Like, safety does not equal other people being afraid of you. Like that's a setup for tyrant and victim. And guess what happens? At a certain point, the victim revolts and rebels and takes over power and then becomes the tyrant eventually, unless somebody stops that. And you can see it in the mythos of like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. They're all like, you know, grandfather, father, son. Each of them repressed and controlled their kids, and the younger one had to take power from his father and then become the ruler, but then he becomes the tyrant and does it again. And I call it the karma of the father line. And so we need myths that tell different stories of healing, of wholeness, of union. And no, this is not all love and light and, yeah, ungrounded wackadoodle stuff. It's like, hello, myths are supposed to inspire human consciousness. Our myths are myths of war and rape. There's so much rape in Greek and Roman myth. It like makes me sick. And there's, slaying and conquering and winning. And that's like all we see around, being operated by countries and governments and rulers. It's like power over power under. And that is a mythos that it will lead to the extinction of humanity. So if we want to survive and better yet thrive, and if we want to evolve and awaken fully and really truly like move into a golden age, our myths have to shift. And our way of, living them interpersonally also has to shift.
So how do we start telling a new story about ourselves and then the new story about the greater reality so that that's what's happening? And I feel like this is what you really have just so beautifully laid out is this is the portal for us to be putting that into our attention and attention. And how are we telling the new story of what this we're walking into a new earth reality, a new time, a new everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so beautiful. And yeah, we definitely need new myths, new stories.
I would say yes. What I'm feeling with all of this is that exactly that this is a portal time when I feel where are those myths going to come from or what are they or whatever it is. It's to me it's really important that we hold space for them to come back through our own souls and our own beings and not try to create them in our brain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's fine if a person feels called to write a new myth, that's and it comes from the brain, that's fine.
But it might be from the heart, the two working together. That's
Yes,
what really,
yes,
really what
yes, yes,
happen.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That it's our whole being that there's that's I feel so strongly in my own work of holding space for us each. We are every single one of us in our own ways. I mean, even the three of us are a perfect example. We're so different and unique from each other, and yet we all have a commonality, right? Like I think anybody watching this video who knows any of the three of us or all of the three of us can feel that in the three of us, that there's a very specific way each of us holds space for very similar things, but it's like a different vibrational quality that comes through each of us, um, and we're each a divine puzzle piece, or there are divine puzzle pieces that come through each of us differently, right? And we need every single one of them. And anyway, yeah, I think you get that. Kind of lost my my train of thought, but I think you get the point. Is yeah, we need to hold it in a holistic way.
One just other piece is I do think it's important the ancient myths to remember them, especially the indigenous culture ones, and I'm particularly drawn to Egyptian, Sumerian, Babylonian, and then Hawaiian because I'm Hawaiian. But like all of the, I've been really interested in like the traditions and understanding the myths of like the Southern Hemisphere constellations, and we were talking about before, I was like, I want to live below the equator for a year so I can study the sky from that perspective. And even like, the Alaskan and Inuit, like there's just so many amazing indigenous cultures who've held, I feel like their myths have like almost like kind of cloaked and hidden some like really important wisdom from a long time ago that when we really remember the myths and especially the older versions of them before they got rewritten in the patriarchal viewpoint, we actually reclaim something that was almost like tucked away on purpose because it had to be protected until it was like time for us to remember. And so, yeah, I really think that that's a key piece. When I talk about new myths, I actually use the term from, oh my God, his name's not coming to me now, but he runs the Animus Institute. The man that runs I know his name and it's just like not there. But anyhow, I found an article of his when I was researching myths, and he calls them new and ancient myths. And I liked that.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's bothering me that I can't remember his name at the moment. Anyhow, he does like he does retreats where you go out in the land and you do vision quests, and it's through something called the Animus Institute, and he's totally like a brother mythologist, like very deep being.
I'm thinking about Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who
Oh,
also wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves. And since we have a lot of Aries energy, that's very wolf-like.
yes,
But she tells stories in there that about the feminine that are not patriarchal
yes, yeah,
necessarily.
yeah,
And so we have some examples of that, and I know there's others. That's just the one that's on the top of my head right now. But so those are things that we can look at as well to help inspire us around how we're uh, being the new myth writers or the storytellers or however we want to, the ancient new, bringing the ancient in a new way so it works for us now. But those ancient stories, like you said, have so much. They're so rich in what they can teach us and what they tell us. So,
I
yeah.
love Sharon Blackie too for that. Uh,
yes, yeah,
hmm.
yeah,
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 but I also want to throw in just again for listeners of this summit. Um, so Chris Skidmore, who's one of the speakers in the summit, he and I have a lot of conversations on my YouTube channel, on his, he has a podcast called On the Soul's Terms, and he's a speaker in the summit. And he works with Greek and Roman mythology, and he holds space for it in he's the first person ever I've ever known who holds space for those mythologies in a way that feels very honoring and very sacred, and like there's a anyway, if anybody's intrigued by that, if you haven't listened to whatever the talk that we're doing in the summit together with the one I'm doing with Chris, definitely listen to it. But also go and listen to any of the other talks that I've done with him. Um, it feels like it's also important to me, at least, to not completely throw the baby out with the bathwater, like that there is an ancient sacredness in the essence of every tradition, right? To not like just say any one tradition is absolutely completely wrong or bad, because then I feel like we get polarized in a different direction, which doesn't feel good for
mhm,
me. But yeah, so he is a really, really beautiful resource for anybody who's interested in kind of feeling in your own. I feel like we each have our own balance that feels right, and it changes even for me from day to day to day. Like this conversation about XYZ Roman or Greek myth feels great, and this one doesn't, or it's not a black and white thing to me. So I just want to give a plug for Chris and give a plug for bringing in another part of the whole conversation. Yeah.
I love how it's all interweaving together.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just so beautiful.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I would even say, I mean, even I think all three of us in our own work, we have these same basic values where that's part of what we're trying to do is hold space for these stories and these myths and these energies and our own ancient wisdom to come back, to birth itself back into the world. I think that's true for all three of us.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm gonna be, I think, Harmony, you hold star courses, Kaylin holds star courses, and I'm gonna be holding my own star course. And the two of you and Chris are all speakers in it. Like, so, and Heather Ensworth, right? So it's really, really so important to me to give sacred voice to each and every single one of us in our own ways, and really like really be listening, really be hearing each other, and not so much a this person's right and this person's wrong. And
mhm,
you know that's what I love about this summit too, is that I feel like this is part of that magic portal, is like how would love hold space for the rebirthing of myth? I think that's one
Oh, that's
question.
so good. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah. Oh, how would love hold this space for the rebirthing of myth?
Yeah,
Mhm.
literally.
Beautiful. So I think we probably are maybe past our time. I don't know. But it's
We
been
are
so fun
there.
and so great. So, Harmony, do you have a free gift that you're offering, and do you want to share a little bit about that before we wrap this up?
I
Yeah.
do, and I'm forgetting what it is. Do you remember?
No, but it will be linked here, whatever it is.
Okay, I'm
Thanks,
sorry.
yes. No, it's okay. But whatever
And
it is, I'm sure it's brilliant.
yeah.
Yes,
And what
I
about, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was probably I'm so sorry. I
No,
don't
no,
know.
no. It's all... And what about upcoming courses and offerings and
Oh,
what?
well, my website is divineharmony.com. I write a lot, I teach a lot. I have a bunch of classes like on demand, astrology in your shadow, working with the chart to heal and work with shadow, and Stargate Mystery School, I think I referenced. I am having a course coming up. I'm in the process of getting everything figured out and precise starting date, but it's probably going to be like March 1st. It's called The Holy Grail, Becoming the Vessel. And it's all about working with Venus, but also these things that are happening and the living sky, and teachings on the Grail myth, uh, and more. And I'm still in the process of putting it all together, but it'll be on my website. And my newsletter is like one of the best places. I'm not a lot on social media. I
Gotcha.
use it
Well, I got
when
it.
I remember, but but my newsletter is I'm more consistent with. So yeah.
Well, your work is exquisite, and so it's like, again, your divine puzzle piece is like one of my favorites. So just
Thank
yeah,
you. I love what I do. I'm so grateful. Like,
Yes.
it just
Yeah.
it just feeds my soul and spirit. And we all have the thing we're like blessed with.
yeah,
Some of us we meet our soulmate when we're 12, and some of us have like really great health, or you don't ever have to worry about money or whatever. Everybody has their blessing. And I know my work is that for me. And I'm always, always grateful.
Yeah.
Thank
I bet
you.
we all agree with that.
mhm,
Yes, getting to do the work that we get, and to be change agents for the world through what we do is
Yeah.
so great. And that's really what this whole summit is about, this whole March portal is about, this whole everything is about. So yeah. And the other thing I just want to say quickly for those who don't necessarily feel like they have a work that is that for them, your presence is
mm,
more than enough. Your presence in the space of love, if you are adding love to the world, you are accomplishing far more than many people ever do, even if they seem like they've accomplished a lot. That is the most important thing that we need at this time, is for people to show up in love, and in love for themselves, and love for life, and love for the world. That will is be what changes everything. And so if you're doing that, you're doing a lot. You're really here fulfilling your purpose.
Yeah.
yes,
Thank
and yes, and then with that, yes, please come and join us for our equinox ceremony, because this set us up so exquisitely. It's like I could feel the divine, I don't know, it's like you were putting like energetic templates in place or something where
Yes,
we yeah.
that's it. That's exactly what she was doing.
Mhm.
Love
Yeah.
that.
So I think at the actual equinox ceremony, I don't know. I think it'll be, this has seeded that ceremony. And so I really, really appreciate that so, so much. And
Yeah.
yeah, we'd love to have you there live, everybody who can be there, and then it'll be recorded and we'll send it out and all of that. But
And so if you can't be live, the energy will be in the recording. So don't feel like you're going to miss out. But if you could be live, we'd love to have that.
mhm. Yes.
All right. So I think we're maybe complete. So thank you. Thank you so much, Harmony, for everything.
See you all soon.
Bye.